Are you saying it just happened? Like you woke up one day and suddenly everything felt wrong and you have no idea how you got there? Right. Sure. Look, let's be honest with each other for a second. You knew. Not fully, not in a way you could put into words, but you knew. There was a moment. Not some big dramatic blow-up, nothing you could screenshot and show your friends. Something much quieter than that. A comment that landed weird. A look that lasted a second too long. A joke that wasn't really a joke. And you felt it. Right there, in your stomach. You felt it. And then you talked yourself out of it. Because that's the thing about this, it never starts loud. It starts with you sitting across from them thinking, that was odd. And then immediately thinking, no, I'm probably just tired. And you let it go. Of course you did. Because you're not someone who makes a scene over nothing. Because you care about them. Because you're not crazy. Funny thing is, that moment you dismissed. That's exactly where this started. You noticed something was off and you chose, and I mean chose, to file it away. You gave them the benefit of the doubt. Again. You kept showing up, kept laughing, kept making plans, kept telling yourself it was fine. And most days it was fine. Warm enough. Normal enough. Good enough to make you question your own gut. But that feeling kept coming back, didn't it? Every time you had a good evening you'd think, see, I was overreacting. And then something small would happen again. And there it was. That same feeling. Quiet, patient, waiting for you to finally listen to it. You weren't confused. You just weren't ready to hear what you already knew. So let me ask you something. The first time they did something that made you uncomfortable, what did you do? Did you say something? Did you pull back? Or did you just let it go and hope it wouldn't happen again? Yeah. That's what I thought. Here's the thing, it wasn't even that big of a deal. That's the whole point. It was something small. Maybe they made a comment about who you were spending your time with. Nothing aggressive, nothing you could call out without looking paranoid. Just a little remark. Casual. Almost throwaway. And you clocked it. You didn't like it. But you told yourself it came from a good place. Maybe they were just having a bad day. Maybe you were being too sensitive. So you let it go. You adjusted slightly, without even realizing you were adjusting. You mentioned that friend a little less. You stopped bringing up certain plans. Not because you were told to. Just because it felt easier. Less friction. And honestly, things were fine after that, so clearly it worked, right? And they noticed. They absolutely noticed. Because the next time was a little different. Still small, don't get me wrong. Still nothing you could hold up as evidence of anything. But slightly more direct. A question with an edge to it. A silence that lasted just a beat too long. A mood that appeared out of nowhere and disappeared the moment you softened. And again, you adjusted. You explained yourself a little more than you needed to. You filled the silence. You smoothed it over. You were so reasonable about it. So mature. So understanding. And every single time you did that, you were teaching them exactly what they needed to know about you. That you would bend. That you would explain yourself. That if they applied just enough pressure, not too much, never too much, you would move. They didn't even have to ask. I mean, think about it. They never forced anything. There was no ultimatum, no shouting, no obvious moment you could point to and say, that's when it went wrong. It was just a series of tiny moments where you chose to keep the peace. Where you decided the relationship mattered more than the discomfort. Where you convinced yourself that flexibility is what love looks like. And maybe it is. Sometimes. But this wasn't flexibility. This was the beginning of a pattern. And the pattern was simple, they pushed slightly, and you moved. Every time. You remember that first moment, don't you? Because somewhere in the back of your mind, you knew even then. You just didn't know yet what it meant. So when exactly did the checking start? That thing where before saying anything at all, there's this split-second pause. Running it through the filter first. Will this land badly? Is this a good moment? Better not mention that. Better leave that one out. And the worst part? That became normal. That became just how things were. And they just sat there. Unbothered. Not filtering a single word. Not checking anything. Just existing freely while all that mental gymnastics was happening on the other side of the room. Every single day. The friends started disappearing too, didn't they? Not because anyone said, don't see them. Oh no, nothing that obvious. Just a comment here. A mood there. A silence that lasted slightly too long after a certain name came up. And suddenly those plans were getting cancelled. Those calls were getting shorter. And somehow that felt like the easier option. Funny how that works. Here's what's actually infuriating about this. They didn't have to do anything. Didn't have to ask. Didn't have to demand. Just had to make it slightly uncomfortable enough, consistently enough, and watch the adjustments happen all by themselves. Watch the space get smaller. Watch the circle get tighter. Watch someone brilliant and loud and full gradually turn the volume down on themselves. And call it love. So let's call this what it actually was. Because by this point the pattern was sitting right there in the middle of the room, obvious, repetitive, uncomfortable, and still getting excused. Still getting explained away. Still getting dressed up as something complicated when it was actually embarrassingly straightforward. They pushed. There was movement. So they pushed again. More movement. That's the whole playbook. That's the entire strategy. No complexity, no mystery, no grand manipulation masterplan. Just someone who found a door that opened every time they knocked and never once stopped knocking. And why would they? It kept opening. And every time something felt off, every time that gut feeling showed up, quiet but persistent, they had a line ready for it. You're too sensitive. Too sensitive. One of the laziest, most overused tools in existence, and it landed every single time. Because suddenly the problem wasn't what they did. The problem was the reaction to what they did. The reaction to being disrespected became the thing that needed explaining. The reaction to being dismissed became the thing that needed an apology. Wrap your head around that for a second. And then came the guilt. Right on schedule. The moment anything was called out, the whole thing flipped like a switch. Within minutes, actual minutes, the person who started it was somehow the wounded party. The mood dropped. The silence arrived and made itself comfortable and just sat there, heavy and suffocating, filling every corner of the room. And it stayed there until it got fixed. Until the apology came from the wrong person. Until things got smoothed over by the person who had absolutely nothing to smooth over. Again. And again. And again. Think about a frog in slowly heating water. Doesn't notice the temperature rising. Doesn't jump out. Just adjusts. And adjusts. And adjusts, until it can't anymore. That was this. Every small escalation felt manageable because it was only slightly worse than the last one. The bar kept moving and kept getting accepted as the new normal. Until normal was completely unrecognizable. Until the original version of normal was so far back it was almost impossible to remember what it even looked like. The confusion wasn't accidental either. The not knowing which version of them was walking through the door today, that was deliberate. Someone who's constantly off balance doesn't have steady enough footing to walk away. And they knew that. They absolutely knew that. They didn't need to demand anything. Didn't need to raise their voice. Didn't need to make any grand threats. Just needed to make the temperature rise slowly enough that jumping out stopped feeling like an option. Stopped feeling possible. Stopped feeling worth it. Every comment. Every manufactured guilt trip. Every well-timed silence. Every, "you're overreacting." None of it was a bad day. None of it was stress. None of it was a rough patch that needed patience and understanding. It was a system. And it worked. So here we are. Finally. Because it's clear now, isn't it? Not confusing anymore. Not complicated. Not a rough patch. Not just how they are. Clear. The relationship wasn't built on love. It was built on compliance. Every time there was movement, every time something got swallowed, every time an apology came from the wrong person, every time plans got cancelled and friends got dropped and opinions got quieter, that wasn't love being protected. That was control being fed. And the really uncomfortable part? It was working perfectly. Right up until now. See, this is the moment they were always worried about. Not the arguments. Arguments were useful, arguments kept things destabilized. This moment. The quiet, still, absolutely certain moment where everything suddenly makes sense. Where the fog lifts and what's left is just the pattern. Sitting there. Obvious. Undeniable. They didn't make it feel normal by accident. Normal had to be rebuilt from scratch, their version of it, on their terms, at their pace. And it took time and patience and 1,000 tiny calculated moments to get there. That's not a relationship. That's a project. And here's the thing about finally seeing it clearly, nobody can unsee it. That's gone now. The excuse making. The benefit of the doubt. The maybe I'm overreacting. Gone. What happens next is nobody else's decision. Nobody else's timeline. Nobody else's call. Just one question left, really. Now that the temperature of the water is obvious, what happens next? That's entirely yours. If you decide to.